What's up, Physique Training Nation? Coach Gav Sapsid here, and today I'm going to share with you a sexy shoulders workout. Now, what I mean by that is a workout designed specifically to help build your shoulders, to build your delts from all angles. Now, we're all looking to build shoulders or bolder shoulders, but this workout is specifically designed for you if you do have some kind of shoulder issues, or if you have problems feeling your shoulders work when you're actually doing your training. This is kind of a format I'm going to show you that I've learned through years of experience coaching people with shoulder issues in particular, coaching more experienced lifters that have kind of gone through a lot of time and effort to kind of try to avoid certain exercises when it comes to training and building their shoulders. And also from my own experience as well, I've had some shoulder issues in the past just from playing rugby and things like that. So this is all stuff that's tried and tested in the field and will work for you. So let's jump into that first exercise where we're going to go into a warm-up first of all. Okay, first up, warming up your shoulders. Now, I don't actually think people need to necessarily spend 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes, I think people spend up to like an hour, it looks like, warming up, doing a bunch of mobility stuff for their pressing workouts. When you can just throw in just a few kind of mobility exercises at the beginning or kind of priming type movements, and then just reorder your exercises so they just work better for you. So really for me, it's just a case of set foot in the gym, grab a resistance band, and we can do exercises like band shoulder dislocates. Now, I popularized this way to do band shoulder dislocates maybe 3 years ago or so. I think it was tnation.com that I wrote about them first, but they're called dislocates with wraparounds. So you put your thumbs inside your resistance band. This resistance band's from MirrorFit. There's obviously loads of brands that do these. As you come around, slight shrug, and then around the back. As you come around the back, you're gonna wrap your shoulders around, wrap that band around, wrap your shoulders around, and internally rotate. I'll show you from that angle. Internally rotate your shoulders, your elbows are kind of coming outwards, squeeze your pecs, and then you come back around and shrug. So you bring it all the way around, squeeze your pecs, and here, okay? If that's a little bit easy, you can go a little bit narrower, and by going narrower, it's harder on that mobility. But then also, as we go into that wrap around, it's harder because obviously we've got more load from that resistance band. The way I popularize doing these as well is more in a bent over position. A lot of people are doing band dislocates right now. They're quite a popular exercise. They're an easy exercise when you go into the gym just to grab a resistance band and do. And I'm a proponent of them, as you said. But one of the biggest errors I see with them, I'll show you from the side, is coming all the way around and almost like coming here with their back, very kind of extended in their back, all right? Not keeping your core strong, ribs down. To get over that, you can go in a slightly bent over position. So you can start here, come all the way around, add that wrap around, squeeze in the middle, and repeat. And just by going into that bent over position, it's really hard for me to overextend my spine. It's a lot harder position to hold, and you might not like it to start off with. But once you've done it a few times, you'll get used to it, okay? So that's what I would tend to suggest. Pop into the gym, grab your light resistance band, do some wraparounds with dislocates, okay, or dislocates with wraparounds in a bent over position. A few sets of maybe 10, 15, 20 of those, and then you're good to go for your first actual exercise of the day. Okay, so as I said to you at the beginning, we're looking at how to format your workout and certain types of exercises that you might be using in your workout. If I want you to have one takeaway from this video, it's to start with rear delts. Now, the reason I say start with rear delts are because with most people, they tend to be the area of your shoulders, those posterior delts, that are falling behind. And now, what happens when you have those rear delts falling behind is that if I'm looking at you, I might have some big shoulders from the side. But if I turn like this, somehow my shoulders disappear, all right, if I don't have any rear delts. So those rear delts are part of developing that complete package as far as your shoulders go. Because they also tie nicely into your lats and your upper back, it creates that nice kind of silhouette from the back. By starting out with rear delts as well, we're prioritizing a weaker muscle group. We're also kind of warming up our shoulders and getting a little bit of kind of mobility in there and opening out our chest at the same time. So I'm going to show you a few rear delt fly variations that I'm a big fan of, all right? So first off is a chest supported variation, all right? So I've got my bench set to an incline somewhere around 45 degrees. I'm going to set my chest on that bench. Now, you can either use, and I know a lot of you like specifics, use this grip's better than the other, this bar path, this elbow angle is better than the other, but everyone's completely different, okay? I'm going to perform these going directly out towards the side because I feel better at doing these. I'm also going to be using that palms down grip there, all right? So I'm going to fly all the way out towards the side, making sure that my rear delts are doing the work. So initiating that movement by contracting my rear delts and repeat. If instead you feel them better when you go into this more neutral grip, then use the neutral grip. More so recently, everyone's suggesting that this angle is the best for rear delts. I do not agree. I think for some people it can be better. It can feel smoother. I get it with regards to the direction of the fibers of the posterior delts, but a lot of the research does actually say you get high activation, flaring those elbows out wide, almost like your humerus, your upper arm is kind of 90 degrees to your torso, than any other angle, all right? So you can either go here, you can go here, or if you feel better, go back here. I don't mind, all right? So you might start out with sets of maybe 10 to 15 of those. I'll show you another variation as well while we've got this bench here of some rear delt flies if you want to use that instead. Okay, so here's another way to do rear delt flies. I've got my incline bench. This one's probably set to about 30 degrees. And what I'm going to do, as with the previous exercise, I like here, so I like that palms down grip directly towards the sides. You might like here. That's also another good option if it feels good for you. You might also like that, okay? There's no right or wrong with that. Go with whatever grip and arm path that feels best for you, and you can actually feel your posterior delts being targeted. Another actually great option is the reverse pec deck if you've got a reverse pec deck, and I'm going to show you that now. Okay, reverse pec deck, if you've got one of these are absolutely brilliant. Don't be thinking they're a little bit bodybuilder-ish, a little bit non-functional because they're a machine, because they're absolutely great. Especially one like this that does, just because the design of the cam, does enable you, unlike dumbbells, to maintain tension throughout the entire range of motion. Cables are also a great option as well for rear delt flies. I might show you one of those in a minute. We'll see kind of where we get up to because we've got a fair bit to go through today. So with these, the main tip here, okay, I want to share with you, as opposed to putting your chest here, okay, look what's going to happen, all right? As I come back here, and again, I'm taking more of a palms down grip because that feels good for me. As I'm here, I'm actually getting a lot of upper traps engagement right here, all right? Just by being kind of butt in seat all up close to it. Now instead, what I want you to start doing, shift your butt back on the seat, which is going to change you more into kind of a leaning forward angle with your torso. So by switching back here, automatically what happens is I'm kind of just changing that path just a little bit away from into my upper traps. So I take myself back just a little bit as far as kind of that machine will allow. And now I've just changed the angle so I'm not quite getting as much in my upper traps. All right, so I'm there, I'm getting a little bit more upper traps. I'm there, I've changed the angle, a little bit less, and a little bit more focus on those posterior delts. All right, you know what? We've got some time. Let's show you some rear delt flies on the cables as well, because I'm a big fan of hitting those rear delts as much as you can, because for most people, they are a weakness. And if you want to have sexy shoulders and capped delts, it's your rear delts that you do need to prioritize. So let's go into some rear delts on the cables next. Okay, so rear delt flies on the cables. I've got my cables set to around about chest height, okay? And what I'm gonna do is, if you've got little things called teardrop attachments, attach them to the end, they're a little bit more comfortable. 95% of gyms don't have them anyway, they're really hard to get hold of. So you just hold onto kind of the ball of your cables. So I'm gonna cross the cables, step back just a little bit, all right? So find the position where I've got that tension to start off with, and all I'm gonna do is flare my elbows out wide. Squeeze, get my rear delts right in there, and then get that position all the way back to the start. So as always, focus is on rear delts. I'm not focusing on how much weight I'm lifting, how much I'm moving. I'm just trying to get that tension, that sensation in my rear delts, okay? So we've hit our rear delts to start off with. Let's go into kind of the second exercise you might use in your workout. You've got plenty of options there. You might start out with your rear delts. Let's go into our second option, which for me is always going to be a face pull. We're here, we're in the cables. I might as well show you right here a cable face pull. Okay, so I've written plenty of times about how big of a fan I am of face pulls. Think of face pulls as kind of like the insurance policy for your shoulders. So they're going to be hitting our rear delts, our posterior delts, but at the same time, they're kind of hitting our shoulder external rotators, specifically that infraspinatus muscle that acts as that external shoulder rotator. So we're going to be throwing these in more towards the start of our workouts to strengthen those muscles and kind of build that insurance policy for our shoulders before we do then go into our heavy pressing work. I'm going to show you two options. First off, with a rope, okay? Good old rope, good old donkey bollocks, okay? So I'm going to start out with a palms down grip. Some like to use this grip here with more thumbs pointing towards them. I'll show you that in just a second. But we're going to go palms down grip. We're going to step back, and all we're going to be doing is thinking elbows out, shoulders towards ears, spread the rope in the middle, all right? You can go a little bit higher with them. That's going to buy us a little bit more external rotation. We get a little bit more, less delts with that one. You can go more here towards kind of chin. And again, that's going to kind of shift a little bit more emphasis more towards posterior delts, unless kind of those shoulder external rotators. Somewhere in the middle is elbows out, thumbs towards your ears. Now, if we switch that grip to more thumbs pointing towards us, you might be able to get a little bit more extra range of motion and come back a little bit further. Personally, I don't like the feel of it. Some people do prefer it. I tend to program that one more for people that do have shoulder range of motion issues, just to allow them to hit those deeper ranges of motion. But most of the time I do tend to suggest going just with that palms down version with thumbs pointing away. I'm going to show you another version, okay, of the same exercise standing. All we're going to do is we're going to take off the donkey bollocks, and then we're just going to put on two of these stirrup handles here, long stirrup handles. I do really like these, arguably my favorite version. If I'm looking to be a little bit special, look a little bit special with these, I tend to put on the fat grips. I really like the fat grips for kind of that extra forearm activation, which helps actually through a mechanism called irradiation, helps to kind of activate more of those shoulder stabilizers. So I do like to put some fat grips on here if I'm using this variation. Obviously don't have some today. Same idea, but we're gonna have a palms down grip. It's elbows out, thumbs towards ears. And as you can see, those long handles are quite comfortably allowing me for a nice big range of motion there. With all face pull variations, you can do them standing. If you're standing, make sure you're not kind of back here. Make sure it's ribs down, core contracted. Stagger your stance if you want to, or you can kind of go feet in and just kind of soft on your knees if you want to, especially if you're lifting some bigger weights with these. You can go chest supported on a bench. You can go sat on the floor. I've seen some people do these on the floor with their back on the floor. So they'd be lying underneath the cables, pulling towards the floor. Not a big fan of that because you're kind of limiting what your scapula can do if you are jamming your scapula down onto the floor. But it's an okay option. It's better than not doing face pulls at all right? So we've done our rear delt fly variations. We've done our face pulls. Now we're going to go on to our heavy pulls, all right? Now this is the kind of the unconventional nature of how I tend to program these types of workouts for, I'd say 70 to 80% of my physique training clients, in that your heavy pressing work is more in the middle of your workout as opposed to starting at the beginning of your workouts, all right? So let's go into our heavy pressing. I'll give you a few options here. So when we're trying to train shoulders, we're mostly thinking about those overhead presses. Now, when it comes to especially longevity within your shoulders, and if you have had some shoulder issues, that doesn't actually have to mean pressing directly overhead or being vertical and pressing directly overhead. We can manipulate that angle a little bit and kind of press in more forwards here. We're still going to be hitting our shoulders. When it comes to any overhead press anyway, I do tend to think of it more as like an anterior delt type of motion anyway. If we want to be hitting our medial delts, we're going to be doing other things with it, which we might do elsewhere in our workouts, which we're going to get to in a little while. But we're going to be using our heavy overhead presses mostly actually to hit our anterior delts, because that's what they're going to be doing anyway. Your staple is obviously your standard dumbbell overhead press, all right? So dumbbells on your knees, probably going to use our knees here just to whip them up. We're going to go neutral. I like a neutral position. Press overhead, elbows tuck on the way down, nice full range of motion, and repeat. If you feel better going at a slight angle there, I'm good with that as well. If you want to go a little bit wider, yes, it does arguably target your shoulders a little bit better, but it does so with your shoulders in a slightly more compromised position if you're flaring out a little bit wider. So it's risk versus reward with that one. I also do like a kind of an Arnold press where you can bring it all the way around the front and overhead. Again, another great overhead pressing option. I am also just talking about the angle of the bench as well. I'm not pressing with the bench completely vertical, just slightly back, because I have issues going directly overhead. If you have the same, then same idea. You might go on kind of like a 70-degree angle bench as opposed to a 90. Same with anything else. You might do a barbell military press, same sort of angle. Smith machine military press, same sort of angle, okay? Let's go into another exercise that I show you that's often performed incorrectly, which is a seated shoulder press in a machine. So I'm in a hammer strength seated shoulder press machine at the moment. The reason why I wanted to show you this one is because it's a little bit of a bugbear of mine at the moment, people in how they're setting this one up. And it's in an unnecessary way. I see why they're doing it, but it's actually unnecessary. And what people are actually doing is they're setting their seat to a normal height, and then for some reason they're using like yoga blocks or like some squishy blocks of some kind to put underneath, okay, so basically you can lift from a higher starting point. Now see, the reason why you might do that is so you can lift from a slightly higher starting point, all right? But then what tends to happen is the yoga blocks just fall out, and then you finish your set and it bangs all the way back down to that start position, then you've got to reset it every time. The solution, unless you're so tall it doesn't work, you probably have to be over about 6'7", 6'8" for it not to work. The solution is simply just bring your seat all the way down, all right? So I'm gonna bring my seat quite far down, not all the way to the bottom for me, all right? But I'm gonna bring my seat down. So my starting point now is almost with my thumb just below my ear height, because that's where I want it to be. If I bring it all the way down, actually, to be fair, that's probably a little bit better for me, all right? So from there, I've got that starting point every single time. I've not got some yoga blocks falling out the side as I'm doing these either. And just the same with dumbbell or a barbell, I'm just going to be using the grip width that's going to feel most comfortable for me and my shoulders, okay? So pretty much self-explanatory exercise, but I did just want to share with that with you guys at the moment, because as I said, it kind of seems to be a thing of the moment in terms of using yoga blocks in the hammer strength shoulder press to start from that higher starting point. Solution's easy, just take the bench all the way down, job done. So when it comes to overhead pressing, I would tend to actually only program maybe just one within a workout, maybe two, depending on kind of the resilience of some of my clients' shoulders. So we've done our rear delts to start off with, we've done some face pulls. We can swap the order of those two as well, depending on what kind of our priority is with those as well. And then we go on to our heavy press. That might just be in a slightly lower rep range. We might then do a heavy press after that if we want to. If you do, then you're going to be looking at doing a slightly different angle. So let's say your first heavy press was more of a neutral grip. The second might be just slightly wider than that, okay? Or might be a single arm variation, for example, or you might take it from a seated position to a standing position. Either way, you're not hitting the exact same movement and same muscle fibers as you were in that first heavy press. After that, we might then go on to some lateral raise variations to hit more the medial delts, all right, to really kind of improve the width of our shoulders. If they're a little bit of a weakness, we can actually start out with lateral raise variations and working our medial delts. So if that's the case, you might do your rear delt flies, you might do some face pulls, and then you might do some lateral raises after that before you then go and do your shoulder presses. But today, in kind of this format of things, we're going to be doing these after our heavy variations. I'm a big fan of cables for this one. Constant tension, all right, really, really nice on the elbow joints as well. And we don't really have as much shoulder issues with this one as I find people do have with dumbbells. I do actually find with dumbbells people get a lot more kind of elbow kind of tendon issues with those. So I tend to say just stick with cables for maybe 70–80% of the time. I like to use a staggered stance, all right? We're gonna do like a single arm variation of this. I like to go with a staggered stance because we can have that cable through our legs and keep some nice alignment with it, all right? So I'm here. I could even, if I want to, just drive my elbow against the side here. There's lots of kind of variations of this cable setup here, most of which you can put your elbow against the side to give you that support. And we're gonna raise kind of in that scapular plane, which is like 30 degrees forwards there. So as opposed to directly out towards the side, we're just slightly forwards. And the aim of the game here is to focus on our shoulders, particularly our medial delts, doing the work, as opposed to simply lifting weight from position A to position B. Once we've done our reps on one side, we turn around and do them on the other. We can also do a slightly different angle. We might go in here, okay? We might start out in the front if we want to and kind of step away a little bit. I quite like that because we've got a little bit more loading in that bottom portion, all right? So we can go here and more cross body at the front and just allow that hand to come across the front if you've got the range of motion for it. We can go behind. I don't mind behind, okay? Again, we're just changing the arm path for that. So that's slightly more out towards the side. Okay, but you've got a few options there, all a single arm kind of cable variation. We can also use two cables if we want to as well, but especially with one cable gives us that extra focus. So there's one lateral raise variation. I'm going to show you a couple more as well to go away with, which are also bangers that you will enjoy and will really pump up your shoulders. As I've mentioned, I'm not as big a fan of dumbbell lateral raise variations as I am of cables. I just think you've got a little bit more longevity in your shoulders when it comes to using cables for most of the time. That being said, that doesn't mean I hate dumbbells. I'd say most of the time I'd use cables for probably 70–80% of the time, and then the rest of the time tends to be dumbbell variations or other variations, sometimes even kettlebells, all right? So if you're gonna do dumbbell lateral raises, okay, my program right now, I've got some dumbbell lateral raises in there, but if you're gonna do them, then one of the biggest things people are scared of is using full range of motion with them. So here's what I mean. So most people will start here, that's perfectly fine, and raise to here. Now, I'll be honest, I have shared this a lot in the past, using them like this. And look, if someone can change my mind, I'm always open to it. And one thing I have found recently, especially more with myself, actually with my own shoulders growth, and with kind of a few clients that I've experimented with this with, is actually just using that greater range of motion if you have it and you don't have any issues going into that range of motion, and starting out the front. So starting out the front, almost like rounding your shoulders a little bit, like feeling that stretch in your shoulders, and then coming all the way up, not just stopping here, but coming all the way up to here if you've got it, all right? So I'm still using that scapular range of motion, but I'm coming all the way here, almost rounding my shoulders, and then up to here, okay? If you've got that range of motion, then think about it. We're taking that shoulder, those delts, through a greater range of motion, and therefore we're hitting some fibers that we might not have if we've just been doing this the entire time. That's not to say this is wrong or I no longer believe in this. I still program that, all right? But if you are looking for something a little bit different, if lateral raises aren't working for you, it's a good idea just to change it up and just see, after a few weeks of sticking to these, what you can kind of get out from it. They're not kind of unique to me. I picked that variation up off of Dr. Mike Israetel, so credit to him. But as I said, I'm always open-minded to if someone can change my mind about something, if something can work better. But give that variation a go. I think you'll like it if you do have healthy shoulders and that range of motion does feel comfortable. Okay, so let's talk about cuff lateral raises. Now, again, another exercise at the moment, another thing I'm seeing quite a lot of. When it comes to more advanced lifters that do need to consider things like saving their wrists because they've got so much volume going through their wrists, so much volume going through their forearms and their kind of wrist flexors and extensors, then I can see a place for cuffed variations of things. I can also see a place, people forget that cuffed variations have been around for years. Coach Nick Tuminello, I believe 15 years ago, was writing about them, filming them, specifically for the purpose of people with injuries to their hands and to their wrists. Okay, they're nothing new, but they've seemed to have kind of come back around in certain bodybuilding circles and just seem to be used by everyone from beginners to more advanced athletes. If you're a beginner, you have no purpose using these. You have no right really to be using these. You don't need to, all right? You need to stick to the basics. But if you're more advanced, you've got some issues. We need to kind of think about loading and spreading loading around to different areas, then cuff variations can be good for you. Here's a good option. We're gonna go lying, all right? Lying crucifix raise. So I've got my foam pad there, my AirX foam pad. I've obviously got my cuffs on here. I've got my knees bent. My head is set there, just in a nice position. You can obviously do it without that, but I'm just a lot nicer. My spine's a lot more aligned in there, okay? I've got my cable crossed, sorry, in that, I'm getting my words tongue-tied here. So I've got my cables crossed here, and all I'm gonna do is out into that lateral raise and then return to that starting point. So up into that lateral raise, focusing on initiating that movement with our delts and repeat. Okay, again, we're using that scapular plane kind of 30 degrees forward. So imagine that's kind of neutral, that's 0, about 30 degrees forwards to there. Okay, so that is a good option as far as a cuffed lateral raise variation is concerned. I'm not saying everyone should go out and now use that variation, but if you are more advanced and you can see the use of it, it can be another great option instead of dumbbell lateral raises or your standard lateral raises where you're actually gripping something as opposed to having something around your cuffs. Another thing I'm seeing at the moment actually with a cuffed lateral raise is holding something whilst you're doing that one to increase biofeedback. I get it, but at the same time, I think it's a little bit extra, and I think too many people are doing it without seeing the actual reason of why you would doing it, where there are better options that someone should be doing instead. Again, if your coach is prescribing that to you and they're prescribing it to everyone else, it's just a cookie cutter approach. There's nothing special about them apart from if you do need them to offset some load somewhere else, okay? So give those ones a go if they do kind of fit the bill within your own training right now. I can kind of take them or leave them. They don't really have much of a place in most of my clients' programming. I do sometimes include some cuffed variations if it kind of fits the bill. So we've got to this point in our workout where we've started with our rear delts, our kind of rear delt fly variations there. We've gone into our face pulls, like our insurance policy. We've then gone into our overhead press or overhead presses, depending on the amount of volume that you're trying to hit with those. We've then gone on to some medial delts work with our lateral raises. So we've shown you some dumbbell variations, some cable variations, and obviously Jules just showed you the variation using a cuff. The last part of your workout really I like to see is working on a weakness, again, getting a little bit extra volume for a weakness. Now, as I said at the start, a lot of people, their weakness is those rear delts. So you might end up at the end of your workout doing a little bit more isolation work for your rear delts. You might do something slightly different than what you started off with. I've obviously already shown you some of that stuff. So let's say you started out with some, dumbbell rear delt flies at the start. You might then finish off with some, reverse pec deck to finish. If, as I said, rear delts are more kind of your, kind of that weak point. But what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to show you some stuff to specifically isolate your anterior delts, because I know you like kind of to work your anterior delts within your workouts. So let's kind of finish off with some of those. So I'm just going to show you some kind of novel ideas actually here. So a couple of variations that I popularized, again, just through tnation.com, most of my stuff. So I call these uppercuts, okay? So we're going to start here out in front, almost like kind of driving a bus, all right? So out in front, I'm then going to scoop over my head. As I scoop over my head, I'm going to kind of uppercut with that arm and then back towards the middle. Twist, uppercut, twist, uppercut, okay? So one arm is almost, it's like I'm doing a face pull with this arm here. I'm kind of externally rotating. This one is kind of doing an uppercut, all right? So uppercut, externally rotate, uppercut, externally rotate, okay? So that is one option. I'm going to take you to another option that I like for anterior delts using a bench. Okay, front raises on a bench. So I've got my incline bench here. This is kind of like 45 degrees, 30 degrees-ish, and depending on what's going to work well for you. I've got my plate, and all I'm going to do is raise it all the way up as high as my shoulder range of motion will allow, and then back down to that start, making sure that as I return to the start, I'm not losing any tension by coming down too far. There's another one I'm a big fan of. You can also do these standing as well. So obviously don't need a bench for this. I could be standing and just raise almost all the way over my head. I wouldn't go directly over your head. You lose a lot of tension when you go in there, and maybe just a few inches off. We can also go slightly bent over as well, and that creates kind of the same angle that we did with the bench. Slightly bent over. Again, another good front raise variation. Now I'm not going to show you front raises with a bar, pretty basic, okay? You probably know how to do those as well, but front raises with a bar can be another good option, all right? We can use kind of a narrow grip. If you go slightly wider with a bar, we're going to be getting a little bit more medial delts within that, but also kind of anterior delts at the same time. We can also do front raise variations, obviously with cables and with dumbbells. So hopefully you've got a few options there if you do want to hit some extra rear delts at the end of your workout. But overall, we're looking to hit some weaknesses, get a little bit extra volume in there at the end of your workout, just by sprinkling some extra exercises or two in that to hit kind of those weak points. So we've finished our workout, or at least our format of our workout there, with plenty of options that you might want to kind of slide in there. Hopefully you've got a lot to kind of take away with you. As I always say, experiment with what feels good for you, what angles feel best, what exercises feel best, what movements feel best, whether dumbbells feel better for you or cables feel better for you. That's completely up to you. And that's what coaching is all about. And that's what I kind of do with a lot of my clients. Just kind of work out what works best for you. There is no one size fits all. Otherwise, we would all be doing it. So I'd encourage you to go out, experiment, use that format that I've shown you today, because it's a really great starting point. And then please feel free to change that format if you want to, okay, if something else feels better. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed today's video. As always, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also find me at thefitnessmaverick.com. And just remember, if you want to take the guesswork out of your training completely and hand it over to someone like myself, who will literally tell you exactly what to do to get you from where you are right now to exactly where you want to be and achieve your dream physique, then you can always sit down and have a chat or a Zoom call with me about online coaching and the prospect of getting you exactly where you want to go.